Hey, welcome back. Another episode of CBR 450. So last episode you would have seen we got this fired up for the first time. That'll be this video up here. But today I'm going to take a step back before we go any further forward. So as I mentioned in the end of the last video, next things to fabricate are going to be an aluminium fuel cell and airbox. However, before I do that, I want to get this frame finished up. So a lot of stuff in this frame is still just tacked in place. I left it like that because I just wanted to make sure everything was going to work before I fully welded it all. So now that I know the sprockets line up, I'm happy with the engine mounts, I've got a radiator mounted, the exhaust is going to clear everything, I can go through and finish welding the frame. So I've got these bracing plates here on the inside of the frame which I'd made up. They've just previously been tacked. I need to go through and weld these. I need to weld the lower section of these new shock mounts that I made. I need to make some new cross members. So we're going to put a new cross member in front of the rear shock here to stiffen up this area here. I'm going to replace this lower factory cross member under the swing arm here. And I'm going to put a new one in the front here behind the radiator in front of the cylinder. So that's the one that I had to remove that I'd made previously because it was going to hit on the radiator hose. So we'll be putting a modified one in there. Once I've got the cross members done, a couple of electrical brackets got to make up, just a mount for the coil, electrical plugs and the CDI. I've got to put some new gussets in, so I'm going to add a gusset to the top of the head tube here to the frame, a steering stop on the front of the lower head tube there. And then we're going to go through and remove every bracket that I'm not going to use off this bike. So all the factory fairing mounts, fuel tank mounts, factory electrical point mounts, anything that was used for the CBR 125 that I no longer need is going to go. And then I can go through and metal finish this frame. Okay, the first cross member I've got to make is the one that sits in the front here. So originally it ran directly straight across there. It hit on this outlet on the front of the cylinder head here, so I had to cut that out. So we're going to be replacing it just slightly higher where it will clear the outlet. However, the hose is still in the way. So my plan there is to drill out this new piece here, and then I've got this piece of tube here. I'll be welding that into the middle of the cross member, and the radiator hose will run straight through the middle of that. Kind of worked out pretty lucky that where the hose runs, it's directly in line with the frame, so I think that that will work. It'll be centered through that piece of tube once that's in the cross member. So I'm going to start drilling this out now and get it tacked in place and make sure it's going to work. Okay, so here's the new cross member that's going to go in the front. As you can see, we've just got a piece of tube welded into it that I've then blended to try and make look like it was one piece, and then the radiator hose is going to run directly through the center of that. So I did double check this a couple of times as I was making it to make sure it was going to fit, but I will just chuck it back into the bike now for you and sit the hose through it so you can see how it's going to work. Alright, so just got this cross member sitting in here. I just need to mark the frame where it needs to be welded, and I'll weld it in once I've got the frame stripped down and up on the bench, but wanted to make sure that it was going to work, and it looks like it will. So radiator hose runs straight through the center of that piece of tube there, and then the cross member will just weld into the frame about an inch or so higher than it was originally, maybe a little bit more, but I think that it's going to be fine. It solves the issue of having to relocate the radiator hose. If I can run it straight through the frame, then that's awesome. So now that that's all sorted, ready to be tacked in, I'm going to start measuring up for the next cross member I've got to make, which is this rear one here, which is going to run in the middle of the frame here in front of the shock. So I wasn't going to put one in here because I was concerned I was going to have issues with clearance with the exhaust, because the exhaust I'm going to run out, around, snake around the shock like this, up under the subframe, and have the muffler sit under the tailpiece. But I'm worried because it is quite a big distance between this cross member and where the shock mounts. There's going to be a lot of flex here, especially because it is the shock mounting point. So I'm going to put a cross member in here, and I've come up with an idea which I think is going to allow me to have room for the exhaust still. So I'm just going to start mocking one up out of cardboard now. I'll show you that once I've got that shape done, and then we'll get it cut out of some steel and make sure that it's going to work. So we have a cardboard template just roughed in place. This is my idea for the cross member. So I'll be transferring this to some 3mm mild steel plate, cutting it out of that. My theory is that it's going to be strong enough because it's got to have the fold in it, which basically triangulates it a little bit. And that by having it just out of 3mm plate, I'm still going to have room underneath to run the exhaust through this section here. What do you think? I think it's going to be good, and it's going to do the job nicely. So that's 3mm mild steel plate with a fold in it, clearanced around the shock there. It's going to pick up the front part of the frame as well as under the shock mounts. Plenty of room underneath it to run the exhaust. I think I might drill some holes in this top plate here just so that it looks a bit better, but doesn't really need them. And then it's got, the fold is actually quite a big angle. Hang on, I'll show you. So it's almost 90 degrees. I'd say that's probably about an 80-degree fold. So that's where it's going to get its strength from, because obviously if you've ever tried to bend a piece of angle iron, you'll know what I mean. It's sort of, it doesn't bend. So my theory is that this is going to be strong enough because of that fold in it and the angle of that fold. I mean, look, I don't know. Like my day job, I'm a postman, I'm no engineer, but I figure that it's going to give it enough strength for what I need here. It's mainly for extra support because it does have that cross member underneath there, and it's also got the cross member at the top where the shock bolts into. So this is going to go in here. Yeah, so I will go and drill some holes in this top bit here and tidy this up a bit, get it tacked in, I think. And then we'll do the final weld once the frame's up on the bench. Alright, that's going to do for this centre cross member. It's just welded in the front here. The back is just tacked at the moment. Got to weld underneath and finish welding it once the frame's on the bench later on. I'll also add some more weld to the shock towers here so I can blend this into the cross member so it looks like one piece. I'll show you that when I do that. Some might be wondering about an issue with moisture getting stuck between the two plates. So where I made these cutouts and then I've welded the plate underneath to make the recess, there is a possibility that moisture could get in between them and cause rust issues later on. To try and prevent that, I made sure they had a really good coat of weld-through primer on them before it was welded together. But then also, before I paint it, I'm just going to run a small bead of seam sealer around the inside lip of each of these cutouts. It should hopefully stop any moisture from getting between them in the future. It's going to be under the seat and the subframe anyway. I think it's going to be pretty well protected, but you never know, so I don't want rust issues later on. So that's my plan to help prevent that from happening. So now that I've done with that, we can move on to this bottom cross member. The original one's still in there, but it's got a lot of brackets hanging off it and the side stand mount and all sorts of stuff. Basically, for me to clean that existing cross member up, it's going to take me way more time than it would just to cut it out and replace it with a new piece. So that's what we're going to do now. Get that done, and then we'll get onto the gussets for the steering tube here and the steering stop. And then we'll be at a point then where we can take it down to the frame and get the frame up on the bench to finish it off. Alright, so as you can see, I'm covered in shit from just grinding for the last couple of hours, but pretty much got that lower cross member in place now. So I'll just swing around and we'll show you. So it's just a piece of 50mm by 20mm rectangle tube. Cut a notch into it for the engine clearance there, plated that, and then I've trimmed up the bottom of the frame here quite a bit. Just below where the rear set will mount there. I've probably taken an inch out of that, maybe a little bit more. You can see underneath, so I've still got to do the final welding, but it's plated and capped on the ends there, just for a little bit of extra strength. Talking about these sections here. So they obviously need to be final welded, but that'll be done when it's on the bench. And as far as the rest of it goes, then I think not much more I can do with the engine in the bike and the swing arm in here. I just can't get in there to finish tidying it up, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks for now, and we'll get that finalized once it's all stripped down and on the bench. So I'll just show you what I took out of it, because it's actually quite a bit. Excuse the mess on the bench here. So what we've got here, this was the cross member that came out of it, the standard one, so you can see what I mean with all the brackets and shit hanging off it. Would have taken a while to clean that up, and I don't think I would have been able to get it perfectly round, so it would never have looked right in my eyes. And then we had this section here. So this used to be down there, so this sort of shows you how much I've trimmed off the frame. So I've narrowed this lower section of the frame and also raised it up a bit where it's capped, mainly just for looks, and then also take a little bit of weight out of it. So the combo, was another piece like this on the other side as well. The combination of these things weighed a lot more than the new cross member that I've put in it. So just take a little bit of weight out of it, and for aesthetics as well, because you are going to see this part. This bit will be exposed through the fairing, so I'm going to make some custom rear sets to bolt to these. I've left these factory mounts here. But yeah, just narrowed the frame down just to make it look a little bit better than the factory one did, which was kind of bulky, and it was also different from side to side. Like this piece on the other side was a different shape and just didn't look right to me. So yeah, that's that for now. So let's keep going and let's start doing some gussets on the steering tube and some steering stops. That's going to do for the gusset for the steering tube. So I'll finish grinding that back and cleaning it up when I do the rest of the frame. I used a MIG, so I've got more material to grind back and blend in, and also because the welds on the factory frame around here have been done with a MIG as well, so it'll just be easy to blend them all together. So tick that off the list. Now we're going to make a steering stop for the front. So I've just been playing around with the wiring harness to try and figure out a way that I'm going to mount this coil and electrical plugs. And it turns out that once I'd undone the harness, I've actually got a bit of room in there to move stuff around, so I can use the factory CBR 125 coil mount. I just need to modify it slightly. The CDI mount, I'll show you that one, if you can see right there. So that's the factory 125 CDI mount, and that's going to work with the 450, so that's cool. Don't need to touch that at all. And then all the electrical plugs, I've found a spot where they can live in behind the radiator up under the frame, so I'm not going to need to make a new bracket for those either. They'll bolt to an existing part of the frame in there. So now that I know I don't actually have to go and make completely new brackets, we can get on to stripping this down and get ready to do all the final welding. So that's what I'm going to do now. There's no more fabrication to do while it's on the bench and assembled. So I'm going to get this torn down to the frame, get all the welding done, and then we're going to start making it look nice, I guess, best way to describe it. So linishing all the welds and blending everything in to try and get it to the point where when I do paint it, it's going to need like a real minimal amount of filler, just a skim coat. Nothing be hidden underneath it or anything like that. So that's good, we're finally at that point now. So I'm going to start tearing this down, and then I'll check back in once I've got the frame up on the bench ready to go, start welding stuff up. So here it is. You can see everything that I've modified a bit easier now that it's separate from the bike. So we've got this new crossmember here where the radiator hose runs through. I've just got that tacked in place, so that needs to be welded in. This new lower or bottom crossmember, that needs to be welded in on the bottoms here and then blended into the factory section there. These bracing plates, so at the moment they're plug welded, just a couple of tacks on them. These need to be fully welded all around the perimeter there, top and bottom of the frame. This is the bottom of the new shock mounts, this section here. As you can see, both sides of those, that needs to be fully welded in. This middle cross member also needs to be welded. This is just tacked. So that alone is quite a few hours, but never mind, needs to be done. This is that little notch that I had to cut out for the bolt on the clutch cover. That needs to have a piece of pipe cut and welded into that. Underneath here, so this was a factory part. I can't remember what was even on this. I don't know. Anyway, that needs to be cleaned up. I'm going to put a piece across here and flat there just to stiffen up that section. Nothing heavy gauge, I don't want to add much weight to it, but just to sort of stiffen it up a little bit. These factory hangers here, so you can see from about here down is new. That's the factory stuff there. From side to side, Mr. Honda, when he built this frame, I don't think he used a jig because they are out by quite a lot. 5mm, 1/4 inch, something like that. One is lower than the other. So I'm going to have to even those out, and then I'll make some sort of a plate to cover in there as well. This piece here, that was just part of an old electrical bracket, that needs to go. Coming around to the sides here, so bear with me a minute, and then I'll just tip this frame back up. So, oh yeah, that's the other thing that I've done. So, I went and redid this gusset. It looks really thick and chunky, but it's actually only thin sheet metal. It's hollow under there. I've left the original gusset underneath it, which is the main one for strength. This is just so that it looks good. Because that now matches the angle of the frame there, those lower frame spars now match that. So Can't really tell when the frame's on its own, but when it's together in the bike it looks much better. And then with the steering stop, I did away with the big gusset that was on that, and I've just remade a really simple small piece here. And then I think instead of having the gusset on the front, I'll put something at the back. But anyway, that looks much better. I checked it, that it works with the lower clamp in there, and it fits just fine, stops fine. And it's just sort of not going to grab your attention now, which is what I want. I don't really want people to focus on a steering stop. So yeah, anyway, that's that stuff done. Obviously still needs to be tidied up, but yeah, the shapes are right. So these brackets here, these are the factory fairing mounts, I think. That one definitely is. I can't remember on that one. Either way, they're going. I'll be making my own fairing mounts, probably going to make it bolt on. This is part of a remaining electrical plate or electrical bracket. That's going to go. This hole welded up. These holes welded up. The factory coil bracket is going. Going to put a new coil bracket in there. That can stay. That's the CDI mount. I'll just tidy that up a bit. All these sort of little tab things, they're going to go. That's the factory electrical plug bracket thing. That's going to go. I don't need that anymore. Then we've got the bracing plates here. So again, these need to be welded all the way along the top of the frame on each side. It's going to be a slow process because I've got to make sure I don't warp the frame when I do these, and it's a lot of weld. So I'll just be doing those in stitches as I go. And then the rear here, so this is all welded obviously already. Not the prettiest welds, but they were just there for function basically. So what I'm going to do now is run probably another pass of TIG weld along here, just so I've got some material that I can shape with the file and the grinder. So I'm going to eliminate the visible weld, and it's just going to be a sharp line. But I'll run another pass of weld so that I'm not actually grinding into the core weld here, so I'm not hopefully taking any strength away from it. It's basically just metal filler basically is what I'll be doing, so that I can blend it down into this new cross member. I'm going to be linishing around these just to smooth them out a bit. Not going to take much weld off, I don't want to lose any strength. And then underneath this cross member too, so that's not welded yet, you can still see a bit of light through there. This will be getting fully welded underneath, and underneath I'm not going to be grinding any of the weld off, so it'll have full strength in that. So then on the top here I can leave it, I might just run a really small TIG weld on here just to fill the hole, but then linish it black flat because I don't want any visible weld on the top. I think that pretty much sums it up. I may weld up this hole here, I'll decide when I get to that, because that hole doesn't need to be there, but it kind of matches this one, so yeah, I don't know yet. So yeah, lots and lots of work. Alright, quick change of plans. So that CDI mount, that would be that one there, on the top there, even though that works, now that I'm starting to cut some other brackets off, it's realizing that's going to look pretty crap sitting on the top there, so I'm going to cut this off as well, and I'll relocate this down to underneath this cross member so the CDI is also hidden, and that'll be next to the electrical plugs under there. Check out this, I just cut the factory steering stop off and have a look what I found. Mr. Honda didn't even weld these lower frame spars to the head tube fully. Look at that. That's terrible. So all these people riding around on CBR 125s around the world had their frames not welded correctly. Not even welded correctly, just not welded at all. Shit. Anyway, I think we'll weld those up, eh? And then got a new gusset to go on there. I've just finished all the welding on the frame now, so there was a ton of welding in it, hours and hours. But I think I've got everything now. I'm sure I've probably missed some bits that I'll come across when I'm linishing it all back, but so far looks like everything's done. So now that everything is welded, I can go ahead and spend a heap of time now just cleaning up all the welds. So I'll quickly run through the mods that I've done to the frame, which I haven't already covered. So we already know about the rear crossmember. I've covered that in a previous video. These inner plates here, these have been fully welded top and bottom now. This top crossmember has had the standard electrical brackets removed from it. Put a new gusset in here up the top, a sunken plate in here which will match that once I've finished tightening that up. We've got a new gusset on the bottom here, so these side ones here which tie into this bottom bearing cup, and then have a look underneath. We've also got a flat plate gusset there just to add some stiffness to these frame spars where that was missing the factory weld, and also just to pick up the head tube there. I've boxed these top sections here. We've welded in this new crossmember here which the radiator hose is going to run through. So this lower crossmember, this has been fully welded now. I've put some pieces of pipe, like half cutouts in here, because these need to clear where there's a ridge in the cylinder head. This section of the frame here, this cutout was to clear one of the bolt heads on the clutch cover, so I've put a bit of pipe into that, so that's now sealed. And then let's have a look here, what else have we got? The new crossmember has been fully welded underneath here. The shock plate has been welded. You can see that's pretty ugly. It's because I had to put a few passes on there to fill there. There was a bit of a gap there, so that'll be sanded back. What else have we got? These engine hangers, these have been fully welded. Some of these were just tacked before. We've got the steering stop now. That's been fully welded top and bottom. And we've moved the CDI mount to underneath this crossmember, so the CDI will be hidden when you're looking down from the top of the engine. So lots of mods to this frame. There's actually, I was trying to work out what's actually left of the CBR 125 frame, and there's nothing on this frame that I haven't modified. Every single part of this frame has been either changed, reshaped, strengthened, or just replaced. So I don't know, at what point do you stop calling this a CBR 125 frame and just call it a custom frame? Because there's literally nothing on this left standard. So I think look, we'll still refer to it as a CBR 125 frame because that's what it started as, but it's basically my own frame now. I've pretty much just used the CBR frame as a jig. I guess you can look at it that way. So it's 3 PM now. I'm going to do a couple of hours today, and I'll probably get this finished up a few hours tomorrow. So kind of boring, so I'm just going to set the phone up on a time lapse just to capture some of the process. But once I've got it all finished up, I'll come back and then we'll have a close look at everything. Here we go, just finished cleaning up all the welds on it and taking the rest of the original paint off that I could get to. So here it is in bare metal, raw, nothing to hide. It's definitely not perfect, but it's pretty close to, well, at least it's at the point where it's only going to need like a small skim coat of filler before I paint it. It's generally pretty good. There's a couple of little lows and little bits that I couldn't get to with the linisher, but that's all good. Cleaned up this angle here, this line, so I'm just going to run a file over that now and just straighten that up a bit. Got the gussets all done. Yeah, pretty much what you see is what you get here. There's nothing hidden, it's all raw, all bare steel. So I'm going to put it in a silver primer now, just so that it doesn't rust while I keep working on it. So I just wanted to show it before I prime it, just so that see, I'm not trying to hide anything with primer and paint. It's just this is it in bare metal. So I'll go paint it now, and we'll have a proper look at it once I've got the primer on it. Alright, so that's going to do for this episode. So now that it's in primer, I have identified a few areas that need a bit more attention, but there's nothing that can't be done at a later date. So I'm going to keep pushing forward and get this reassembled, and then we're going to start making a subframe and a fuel cell. So thanks everyone for watching this video. Huge thanks to everyone that's subscribed. I really appreciate that, and even anyone who's just liked it, left a comment, or even watched the video. It means a lot, so I appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.